Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the W Podcast. Hope you had nice holidays and you managed to get some rest. We surely did, but now we're back with a brand new episode. I'm Wolvy SaucyJay here with me, the friendly neighborhood healers. And today we have a warm up episode for the year and for the next season because the PTR is now already up on the servers. So what we're going to be talking about is our wish lists of everything that we want to see change for season 2, and from small quality of life improvements to our gameplay to some big major changes that the community is basically waiting for a long time now. And some of them are going to be, as I said, small changes. Some of them might be wild takes, but some of you guys said that you would like to see some of our wild takes on the comments in the podcast. So yeah, check the links below on ways to follow the podcast. And I guess we can just get started. SaucyJay, you ready?
Sounds good. Yeah. And by the way, happy we're both feeling a lot better. We had a couple episodes where we were under the weather, so I'm feeling 100% tonight. Looking forward to that.
It was dismal. I'm still like 99% because I still have a little bit of a cough left, but should be much better than the previous episodes. All right, so we're just gonna go. We have a list. We're gonna go through the list, and we're gonna talk about each of the items there, and maybe expand on it a little bit. And the very first thing that I would like to see for the next season is a PUG-friendly dungeon design, because we had a lot of problems this season with the keys being way too hard. And part of that is because a lot of the trash and a lot of the boss mechanics are not perk-friendly. They require a lot of coordination. They do a lot of damage, maybe overtuned a little bit. And the problem with that is that, at least in my opinion, when the keys scale up, the difficulty comes naturally from that. So at some point, you're going to get to a key level, and it doesn't matter what that key level is for you. You're going to get to a key level where the dungeon just becomes too hard. It's too much damage. It's too much healing that you need to do just because of the key level. And that's kind of like a brick wall that you get to. But also, you have smaller brick walls before that because the dungeon design is way too hard and the mechanics are not bug friendly. And I think that's pushing away a lot of people from the game because they would like to play the game at some level without that extra layer of difficulty. And that only applies to PUGs because probably that's not a big problem for organized groups. But in my opinion, if the game is a little bit easier in general, it's going to accommodate more people playing it. And then the difficulty comes naturally when you scale up your key. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest wish list there is if a kick does not interrupt an ability, it should be ready to go again. Simple as that. That would be my wish list for that one for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if we had this in the notes below that, but I think that, okay, you kicked. You didn't hit anything for whatever reason. You know, it could be that somebody else interrupted before you, or it could be
Or they
that,
knocked it up.
yeah, there was some AOECC going on. But, all right, let's not incur the full cooldown. Like, because you're saying, okay, let me kick again straight away. That's fine.
Well,
Maybe that's a little bit too much. Maybe Blizzard will never do that. But instead of your regular, let's say, because every kick has a different cooldown, but maybe you incur 75% reduction of the cooldown. So instead of the shaman having a 12-second kick, if you miss it, you can kick again in like 3 or 4 seconds or something like that. If you're an evoker, which is even worse because it's 40-second timer there, at least you can kick again in like 10 seconds or something like that. But I think a lot of people were very reluctant and very negative on the change they made with the kicks because right now if you knock something up and you interrupt it this way, it's probably going to recast the skill again. There are some skills that are not recasted, but most of them keep casting until you actually interrupt them. And that is another thing that goes into the PUG friendliness, that it's very PUG unfriendly because that doesn't matter for high-end groups because they have coordination and you're not going to be interrupting something and overlapping with somebody else. They also know when the AOECC is going to go off, so they don't interrupt. But that's not the case in PUGs. In PUGs, you're basically fighting who kicks first, and then somebody decides, oh, let me press my cap totem, and then you stun everyone, but then everybody's also interrupting at the same time, and it's a chaos. So yeah, I think if they want to keep the way that interrupts work, if they don't revert them back to the way that they were in the previous expansion, where if you CC something with a cap totem
Mhm.
stun knock up, it would not recast. Then they should at least change the way that interrupts work as well, and have some kind of cooldown reduction if you miss it or something like that. Um, I don't know if that's too much to ask for, but it would definitely improve the quality of life in Mythic Plus a lot.
Here's what I'll respond to saying that one. I feel like while I wish they would, I feel like they've seen players adapt and get better at using the proper CC. And I don't see them backtracking on that. Um, how about we meet in the middle, okay? And we say, if you kick and it doesn't land, right? You miss the kick or whatever. It goes on. It doesn't go on CD. You incur a global, I guess, in that case. Maybe instead of whatever, you get a global cooldown. The hit until maybe level 11, right? At level 11, kicks become regular at that point. Like if you miss, you miss. If you don't, you don't. But to your point, making it friendlier for pugs so they can start to get to that higher level of the game, maybe start to become better players and things like that. Because that's what we're talking about, is making it more pug friendly. And I think it is. We had it today. It was a 12, but my mage partner tried to kick, but the evoker in the team it was an AUG and he did an eruption, and now my mage is mad because another ability went off and he doesn't have a kick, and he wasn't very happy in Discord.
Yeah. I see the sentiment for the plus 11s, but I'm actually pugging higher than that. I try to pug 13s, 14s. So, it doesn't make it better if you're in a higher key and you still don't have comps. Like the coordination
Yeah.
doesn't magically become better. Sometimes,
Yeah.
we try to communicate. Okay, you kick that, but it's not the case. That always happens in pugs. And also back to the CC point. Some classes actually have a lot of AoE CC. Like I play Shaman. I have
Oh,
a
amazing.
Cap Totem, which I
Yes.
can take a talent that it fires up twice. So I have a double stun there. I have a knock up. And then I'm a Torrent, so I have a War Stomp, which means that I can basically CC the group for over 10 seconds. And then,
Yeah.
and I think that's
And then
too
the Inch
much.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's too much. So maybe they can take back a little bit on that, so that there's not that many AOE available, and then the interrupts would be even more important. And it all comes to dungeon design, because if you allow big pools, obviously you're gonna need a lot of AOE, and then it depends on how many casters you have there, because you might just run out of kicks at some point if
Yep.
every mob is casting and there's a spell that you must interrupt.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. So I guess a change is needed into that direction. And then while we are on the topic, maybe they need to. We talked a lot about tanks in the past and how it's very unpleasant to be tanking this season because they had the nerfs. But then they also introduced a lot of tank boosters. And there was a post in Blizzard that said, okay, we're nerfing the tanks, and the idea is that they're going to be taking more damage, but the damage is not going to be spiky. It's going to be well distributed. It's going to be
Yeah.
constant flow of damage. So a little bit of healing, it's going to help a lot, but they're not going to be dying left and right. And then every dungeon has few obnoxious tank busters that are one-shotting your tank or something like that. So I think that they need to revert that a little bit. Maybe we had a lot of topics and a lot of comments about the tank nerfs and how they're not good for the game. Maybe they need to revert that. But even if they don't, I think that the tank nerfs would have been fine, could have been fine if there were not that many tank busters and things that the tanks need to do to survive them. Because if the tank dies, it's a wipe, right? So everybody
Yep.
notices that. So maybe if they don't revert the tank changes, at least revert back some of the tank boosters, have less tank boosters, so there's a little bit less responsibility to the tanks, and it makes the role a little bit more pleasant to play, so there's more tanks playing.
Yeah. I like that. I think it's an uncomfortable. I mean, I almost won't heal DKs. I have just really bad luck with DKs because it's going in fresh pool, like It's like I know if I don't see Icebound Fort pop the second before they're going in, I'm either doing pain suppression or mark skin or I'm doing something because they just fall over so easy. Even when they manage their blood chill properly, it's just sometimes they just die too easily, and it's frustrating. So yeah, that can't feel good as a DK either. And I'm sure that happens. Other tanks experience similar things. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm playing tank right now for a challenge that I'm doing, and yes, some of the tank boosters are obnoxious, and yeah, you just run out of defenses and you still die. So it's annoying, and I think some changes need to happen in that direction. I'll add that I'm a little bit scared right now because the PTR is up. You cannot test the new dungeons yet, but we are already data mining some changes for season 2. And unfortunately, I think they're changing some of the trash and the bosses in the way that they're adding first more AoE. So it's gonna feel much like the same season with the pulsing damage and things like that for the healers. But they're also adding some new tank busters. So that's kind of goes against what I said. We're seeing the opposite. Instead of reducing the tank busters, I think they're increasing them. And I'm a
Mhm.
little bit scared about this because tanking is not in a good spot from that perspective already in season 1. And it seems like it's not getting improved in season 2. So the shortage of tanks is probably going to continue, which I don't think it's a good thing for the game. But that's the direction that we seem to be headed towards.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on that note, I think one thing you could do to bring tanks back and keep healers happy would be reward tanks and healers a little bit more with augment runes. I think is just a no brainer, right? You can't do flasks and potions because you're hitting the market with that, and augment runes aren't crafted. I don't think by anybody. It's just they
No.
just drop and yeah,
They're,
right.
they're
Nobody can
still in
craft
the
it, right?
market, by the way, because you can only get them from like if you queue into heroic dungeons and things
Yeah,
like that, and
yeah.
then draw
And
from
that's why
packs.
they're super
Yeah,
expensive, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
reward the tanks and healers with that. That'll encourage people to queue it up. In PvP, when you're doing like arenas and PvP activities, every season you get a cool mount, right? But you have to play a certain amount of games in order to build up points to get that mount. They could do something for tanks and healers to encourage them to get a tank specific or healer specific mount. That's a little bit something extra, and that might encourage other players that are looking to that are mount chasers to try tank, to try healer. So there's another really cool, interesting thing. Yeah, sorry DPS, just pick up a healing set, pick up a tank set, and try to do something a little different. But I think it might be a fun way because there's a lot of people that love mounts, and there's a lot of people that like gold, and augment runes sell for a good amount of gold even today. And we're at the end of the season, and I don't think there's not like a tier 2, I don't think, augment rune. So, they're going to maintain their value throughout the whole thing. So, and those won't have a huge impact to the market because it's not something that's crafted or you can farm. You can farm it, but you got to farm it in dungeons. So there's no real downside to rewarding tanks and healers with those augment runes and an amount. I think that would be my wish list for that.
Yeah. Oh, I'll add two things. First, on the mount, that's a wild take, but I would love to see that. One of the things that I do in game is actually farm mounts. So having something like that, because I don't get the PvP mount, like I don't play enough to actually earn the mount, because it's certain amount of games that you need to. I don't know if it's win or just play, but it's a lot. I don't do that much PvP. But if there was one for Mythic Plus, I would be doing this every season. And if there's different ones for tank and healers, I would be doing the different roles as well. No doubt about that. But I don't think Blizzard is ever going to do something that's specific for a role and then skip the DPS. So if they do one mount for Mythic Plus, then that's not going to help tank and healers because everybody's just going to continue playing the role that they're currently playing. If they do add something for tank and healers, though, they will have to add one for DPS as well. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, they're not going to leave the DPS out. It's not going to be fair. But even if they have one for DPS, I think that's still going to help in the bigger scene, the bigger picture, because there's going to be people like me who will be like, okay, I play healer, I'm going to get the healer mount, but now I'm going to switch roles and I'm going to go get the other mounts as well.
Yeah.
So naturally, the DPS players that do the same, they're gonna switch to tanks, they're gonna switch to healers, which is going to have like I guess a constant inflow of people trying the different roles, different specs, and maybe they like it. Maybe the DPS switches, and let's say it's a certain number of games that you have to play. It's not going to be connected to rating. And then maybe they like tanking. Maybe they like healing, and they are like, okay, let me play a little bit more on this character. So maybe this is going to help. Yeah, there needs to be some kind of I'm gonna call it mechanic, but there needs to be some kind of a mechanic that is going to make you play the other roles. And in fact, that just comes to my mind. But there is an achievement right now to play all the dungeons from the current expansion, The War Within, as a different role. So you need to play on Mythic difficulty. So you need to do M plus as a tank on all the dungeons. I think it could be M0 as well, right? It doesn't have to be a hierarchy, but there's different achievements for DPS, healers, and tanks. And there's one that then combines all of them into a meta achievement. And you cannot finish that right now because we haven't played on the dungeons that are going to be in Season 2 from The War Within. But once that happens, you're going to get that. I don't know if there's a reward. There might be like a title or something small. But they could definitely do something like that. And instead of just being M0, it could be like a hierarchy. Maybe complete all of them in +10 or something, and then you get the mount or things like that. So I think this is going to be good for the game in general, and it's going to make people try different things. And then you never know. Like I like tanking right now. I'm trying tanking. I kind of like it. It's hard.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's hard, but I like it. Yeah.
You know, one other point on that, just because sometimes people do listen, Blizzard. In PvP, you don't start earning the currency or whatever, the resource for the mount until you get to 1,000 rating. And then once you're at 1,000 rating, the games after that start applying towards that. So you could say level 8, like a +8. At +8, when you successfully complete the key, you get 1 token or whatever it is, right? Or 10, whatever it is. And that it's not people just farming out 2s as a tank to get the mount. They actually have to get to a higher level as that role, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, some kind of a progression system there would be nice. Yeah. And then going back to your augment rune stuff, I'm totally up for rewarding the tanks and the healers, especially if there's like a shortage for a certain role, even if it's DPS, although that never happens. And maybe for that, to implement that, we're gonna need some kind of a solo queue system, because right now with the LFG2, good or bad, I don't think there's a way to like reward somebody for joining a group in LFG, no matter what the role is. And we know where the shortages are. And we've talked a lot about a solo queue system in the past. We're not going to go into much detail here, I guess, but I would like to see something being tested out. There were a lot of wild takes in the community of how a solo queue system should look like. There's people saying, okay, make it to go from 0 to +10 and then let people pug after that and use the LFG2. So even if they try something small, even if it's like for M0s, etc., I would just like to see some kind of a test, just to a proof of concept, see if it works on a small scale, see if it works for just low keys or something like that. But I would like to see just the start of something that could eventually develop. Of course, if they can come up with a whole system and implement it straight away and everybody starts playing with it, that's gonna be good. Maybe it's too much effort to do right now. Maybe they're not ready. But at least some kind of testing, something to chew on for Season 2. And then if they do that, they can also experiment with things like that. Let's reward the healers and tanks with augment runes, extra gold, whatever it is. And see if that actually brings up more people playing those roles, which are obviously in shortage right now.
Yeah, good. Yep.
Okay. Another one which is still in the Mythic Plus area, but that could be a little bit of a wild take. But I would like to see dungeon design that introduces a little bit shorter timers and, let's say, 3 boss dungeons. And I'm saying this because one of the dungeons that's coming back for Season 2 is Theater of Pain, which is a long dungeon. It has 5 bosses, and it could be very unpleasant if you get all the way to the last boss and then you wipe there. You've wasted, like, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes of your time. I keep going back to Nokku Defensive from Dragonflight, where it was a 40-minute dungeon, and basically one of the hardest parts was the transition on the last boss to the last phase.
Yep.
So you would spend there like sometimes 40 minutes or something, and then people just don't see the ads on the last boss. You wipe and you wasted your time, right? And that feels really, really bad. Uh,
Yeah.
and then correct me if I'm wrong, but the PvP activities are like 15 minutes, right? The battlegrounds, the arena.
Some of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, most of them. Arenas can
maybe.
be 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're much shorter. I guess the solo queue could
Yeah.
take a little bit longer, but yeah, the point there is you commit your time to do something, and you know you're investing like 15 to 25 minutes, something like this, at the
Yeah.
worst.
Yep.
And if it fails, you just go in, and then you can do 4 of those in an hour or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Mythic Plus, if you're going to knock with offensive and it fails, considering the waiting time, etc., you can do 1 of those per hour. So
Yep.
that kind of feels a little bit unfair, especially if you're learning and not all of your keys are timed, etc. So if you do shorter dungeons, if there's 3 boss dungeons with, let's say, a little bit less trash, and they're like 20-25 minute timers, I think that's going to be much more enjoyable, because think about this season. What are the best dungeons? Everybody loves Arakara because it's fast, it's quick. Yes, the last boss is hard, but it's a 3-boss dungeon. So, people like to go there.
Yeah.
Everybody is doing Mists of Tyrannicide. Why? 3-boss dungeon. It's shorter timer. It's much more enjoyable to play. And then I don't want to be a bad prophet, but I don't know how many people are going to like Theater of Pain next season, because it was not one of the favorite dungeons back in Shadowlands. I think it's when it was
I can't
introduced.
wait.
Yeah,
I can't wait to do it on my Warlock. I
yeah, and
cannot wait for the PvP.
yeah. I mean, that's a different topic, but the whole point is it's a long dungeon. It has 5 bosses, so it doesn't seem that it's one of the fan favorites, right? While the short dungeons, which people like, are just 3 bosses and are much shorter. So what I would like to see going forward is more stuff like that, and less 5 bosses, even less 4 boss dungeons, so that we have a much enjoyable experience overall in the Mythic Plus scene.
Yeah. I think that's a valid point. It is one of the more frustrating things to just fall over at the end of a dungeon. At least now, you still get some rewards that are more meaningful when you don't time keys, and so people are staying in keys longer when normally they would just kind of bail out. So that was a positive change. But yeah, I think smaller dungeons are more enjoyable. Maybe they can play around with the end of the dungeon rewards for some of those smaller ones. Maybe make the rewards a little less, and for the bigger ones that are 5 or 6 bosses, or 5 bosses, maybe increase it a little bit. That way people feel like at least there's something that they're getting out of it that's a little bit more
Yeah, get like
for
an
the
extra
time
piece.
invested. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah, and then on this quick topic, since it's dungeon design, I guess run back times on some of the dungeons are obnoxious, like Stone Vault and then Green Bateau. So maybe people have been asking for this, but if you kill a boss, just move the spawn location to that area so you
Point.
can start from there.
Yep. Yeah.
Dying is punishing enough. We've talked about this enough already, but you're running back. The timer now is 15 seconds. So there's plenty of things that you lose when you die. So at least update the spawn location so that you can release whenever you die. And then another take that I kind of have is those 15 seconds, the Gaio affix that has been added. A lot of people were saying that's too much time. And I agree, it's too much time, but it also starts way too early. I think this affix is introduced at a +7. And at +7, it's still an area where people were pugging. A lot of mistakes are happening because you're
Yep.
learning.
Yep.
This is actually the entry point that you start learning M+ if you come out of Delphs, because this is where the gear leads you, right? You don't want to be doing +2 if you're 600 item level
Yep.
and above. So my take on this is, all right, introduce it. That's fine. But then let's make it so that the punishment that you get, the amount of seconds that you're punished if you die, scales with the key level. So at +2, +3, it's basically not going to be there. At +7, it's going to be, let's say, 5 seconds, but it's not going to be 15. And then once you get to the higher keys, then it could be 15 seconds at top if you do plus 12s or something like that. I think that's going to be a little bit more fair, and it's going to give a little bit of a leeway onto the people who are loading Mythic Plus into the lower dungeons, so they're not that punished that much, and it doesn't feel that bad if you're dying.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer for me. I think that's really good idea, and yeah, it's a little bit more forgiving in those pugs, and it's not like they go from not having a death timer to then having this big 15-second one. It goes like, hey, you're now being introduced to it, and the higher you go, the more punishing it's going to be. So start using your defensives, do what you can do to stay alive, and don't say heal question mark in chat when you die, right? Like, don't do that.
That should be, there's that system that the bad words are erased. So if it's like one heal, maybe they can add the. Never mind. That's a healer talking. All right. Next topic. This one is a little bit more specific to testing and then improving the dungeons as the season starts. But it felt like this season they waited a lot until they started changing some of the dungeons that were overtuned. We just got a few weeks back, we just got the nerf to the tank busters, which was like, I don't know, 10 weeks, 12 weeks into the season. And we felt like this was way too late. Those things should have been changed much earlier so that people could actually experience them and say, oh, okay, Blizzard actually does care about M+. They're trying to make it better. Let's stick along, because a lot of people quit at this point. So those changes are irrelevant to them. So what I would like to see is much more, we can even call it volatile changes to the dungeons, especially at the start, because when things come out fresh of the PTR, some of them are overtuned. This comes back a little bit to how they test things, because on the PTR, your gear is scaled, so it doesn't matter what your item level is, you're always the same item level once you go into the Mythic Plus dungeons. And they're just testing those numbers. Everything is scaled to work with those numbers, but those are not the numbers that you're going to be playing with once everything goes live into the servers. So I think that's one of the reasons why when everything goes live, some of the dungeons are very hard and they're overtuned and they have to nerf abilities and things like that, because they're trying to make everything a little bit harder. They don't want to make it easier, because then they'll have to buff it, and that's going to feel bad.
Yeah.
Okay, let's assume that this is something that's going to be part of the process if they cannot deliver perfectly tuned dungeons once they go live. But I would like to see much quicker changes. I would like to see tuning every week, because now once everything goes live, they have the data. They know what's hitting hard. They know where the bottlenecks are. So
Yep.
don't wait 10 weeks to start changing. You
Yep.
can see which are the harder dungeons. Just start nerfing them right away, so that people can see, okay, help is coming. Those are hard
Yeah.
dungeons, but they're eventually gonna get there, and even out with the rest of the pool. And I think that's gonna contribute to a much smoother experience in Mythic Plus. And nobody's ever going to cry if something is nerfed in a dungeon, right?
Yeah.
So if those things happen
Uh,
and they keep happening, people are just going to have a better experience.
Yeah, so on that point, I think you bring up a valid point. I do. Here's the thing. Frequent and small changes over 10 weeks is a lot better than big sweeping changes, right? And so because you just said like if they nerf it, nobody will complain. But what can happen if you make too big of a change and then you have to rebuff something, right?
Yeah.
Now people are going to cry because they missed the nerf. They didn't get the kill or something, and now they're mad because it's harder, right? So frequent small changes in dungeons go a long way, because number one, it lets the community know that you're paying attention and you're aware there's an issue, and you don't want to over nerf it because you don't want to make it just fall over, but you're aware and you're testing and retesting and retesting. And so small frequent changes, I think, are significant for things like this. And like you said, not waiting 10 weeks when most players have already given up because it's too hard content for them. They don't feel like they can kill things. The worst one for me, and this is not this season, it's going back, was Lower Kara in was it Shadowlands or
I think it was
I don't remember,
Shadowlands.
but it's like the first week of like Lower Karazhan was like, what is this? Like, this is ridiculous. And they did change it pretty quickly actually because it was just busted. But you don't want to wait 10 weeks. Imagine that 10 weeks, people would have freaked out. I think it was
Yeah.
doing like a 12 or 15 or I
Yeah.
don't remember what level of key it was, but it was rough. It was
I
rough.
had the same experience. I think it was Neltarian's Lair, the worm balls that had the poison there. Man, this thing, they nerfed it with over 50%. They nerfed the damage with over 50%. And we did it before the nerf. It was low key. I don't remember what the
Yeah,
number was. There was different numbers back then. I did more healing on my shaman in that low key that I do in raid for 5 men, and we still
that's
died.
insane.
Like
That's crazy.
and then they
Yeah,
nerfed the hell out of it, but it was
yeah,
released in that state. And I
yeah,
would also say something, you said, okay, small changes. I think small changes is something that they'll be more willing to do an experiment with easier, and they can do them more frequently, because if they want to do a big change, and that's one of the reasons why big changes take so long, is because you don't want to do a big change like, okay, something's not working, let's make a big change, right? They need to observe, they need to figure out,
yeah.
okay, if we're making a huge change, what is this change going to be? And they need to test a little bit and see if it's a good change
Yep.
before they release it. So that's one of the reasons why big changes take so much time. You can't just throw big changes right away. They take time to figure out and then to implement. While the small changes, they can do those, and then I don't think they require that much effort to implement. So they'll be more willing to do more small changes, which is what we're leaning to anyway. So maybe they can definitely think in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the key depletion, because we have an announcement that keys are not gonna deplete below 12 during season 2 after you reach some certain IO, etc. And I don't know how people feel about this. I think that it's going to affect a very small percentage of the player base, because first 12 is relatively high. So not many people actually get to 12s. I got there on my main, but I'm definitely not pushing 12s on my on my ults, right? So that doesn't concern me almost at all. And then even if you are playing at 12s, at some point you move past the 12s, so you start pushing 13s, 14s, etc. So that change is not going to affect you at that point either, right?
Yep.
So this is affecting a very small percentage of the player base for a very short period of time as well, because after you move past 12s, that's irrelevant. And I think that this is why people are having a little bit of a negative perception of this. And I would like to see a little bit more on that direction. So it's good that they're experimenting. They're going to see how that area around the 12 works, if it's good, if it's bad, if they like the results. But maybe they can start working towards ways that people can experience that in different key levels. So one of the takes that I have on this is, what if you do not deplete your key right away? So your key basically have lives, and you can try it out. If it fails, you get another attempt on the same level, and then if it fails again, then maybe it depletes then. So that this no depletion mechanic is actually available to more people, and they can experience it by themselves. Maybe even like if you time a few dungeons, you get some tokens, and then you can insert them in your key, and your key doesn't deplete if you have this backup scenario. And it's up to you to decide when or whether that should happen. Do you agree with that, or it's just too wild?
My wild take is a bit more wild. I just say no depletion at all. If you have a key that you can't do, go talk to the panda and drop it down, but just don't deplete it. There's too many disconnects. There's people that just leave keys when it doesn't go perfect, and the key holder basically gets punished for that. I don't really understand the reason. You're not giving people the opportunity to experience that level of gameplay sometimes for enough time. They you go through first pack or first 2 packs. You think about Grimbatol. It's very common for people to wipe on the first pack. It's very common to go up those stairs, or not Grimbatol, Siege of Borealis. The first pack in Siege of Borealis, even Grimbatol with the dragon, like the knockback, people get knocked into the cavern. Like there's things that can go wrong. Somebody gets upset, they leave, right? And now your 5 just became a 4. Your 4 becomes a 3. It's not really why. Like let players experience it and learn and get further and further into the key, maybe with different groups. And why punish them at all? What's the upside of depleting a key? I just don't see the value of that.
I can have a take on this because
Sure.
I've played on the PTR and some tournament realms, etc. And there, even right now on the PTR, you have like this little scroll which allows you to change the key level of your keystone. So you can set it to 5. If it fails, it goes back to 4, but you can set it immediately back to 5, right? So basically, there's no depletion there. And the problem with that is that it's fine for testing, but if it goes live or if you go into a tournament realm, um, what happens is you go into, let's say, a Stone Vault, you pull everything there before the first boss. If it
Sure.
fails, you just zone out and you try again, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of makes it feel a little bit like a raid boss, because what do you do in the raid bosses? You do the same thing. You
Yeah.
pull, you
Sure.
wipe, etc. Right? And I don't think that's the kind of gameplay that should be available in Mythic Plus. I think the depletion kind of installs into you the feeling that, oh my god, we cannot let this cast go off, right? Because if you know that it doesn't matter and you can just go back in and try the spool right away again, you're not gonna care that much. You're not gonna play that carefully, etc. Yeah,
Sure.
maybe if you get past the spool and then you start pushing the key, actually, it changes a little bit. But I think the depletion needs to be there in some form so that you're incentivized to play good. And that type of gameplay where you just go and do the same thing and you progress a raid boss in Mythic Plus is not available. I don't think that's gonna end up being nice for the M Plus. This is
Okay.
what.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So here's the thing. If we're talking about people at 4 and 5s, they just want to get to higher keys and they just want to get gear and crests and Valorstones. So they're not pulling whole things. Now, at the high end of the game, right? Sure. That's the strategy, right? I see it all the time on stream where they're, especially during Dragonflight, it was like, I mean, it was like raid. It was literally like a raid. They were calling out every kick, who's supposed to
Yep.
do what kick. The whole thing was just completely scripted in a very coordinated fashion. And so that's a very small percentage of people that are going to do that. Even in a pug, let's say even at 9s and 10s, nobody's trying to min max like massive, massive pools in a 9 or a 10. They just want to get through it, get their crests. So you're in that scenario where you're talking about not depleting keys because somebody's trying to raid test the dungeon. That's a very small percentage of players that are really at the high level of the game. We're talking like in this current state, 18s, 19s, and 20s. But because of those players, you're now punishing. So maybe we compromise. So let's say keys don't deplete until 12. So any key under 12 doesn't deplete. Once you hit 12s, you won't deplete. But at 13, if you fail, it goes back to 12.
All right, so here's a
15, if you
here's a
fail.
question for you though. At low levels, as you said, 3, 4, 5s, people are still learning. So
Yeah.
you have no idea what's going on. You try your own key, and then you fail. If the key doesn't deplete, right, you're gonna try it again. And at some point, because this happened to me, I started the fresh character right away. Some keys you actually get people to queue up, which are geared for like 12s and stuff. Like I don't know
Yeah,
what they're
yeah,
doing. They're
yeah,
farming
it's
crests or
true.
something, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
basically, in some keys, this is how the LFG2 works. Sometimes you just get
yeah.
carried, right? Sometimes you just get carried. So now, if my key doesn't deplete, I'm gonna try a few times. I'm gonna get lucky in the LFG2, whatever that is. Jackpot season 2.
A guild queued
Yeah.
into my key.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
now I go up a key level and I
yeah,
still haven't
yeah.
learned the dungeon. Like I still have no idea what's going on, right? But now I
Okay,
am even so I was at a key level where I was learning. I didn't learn. I got carried. And now I'm on a higher key level where I still need to learn, but now my gear is also behind because somebody
yeah,
managed to push my key
sure.
level.
Yeah,
So isn't that like going to be bad overall if it keeps happening, and it's going to keep happening because if your key depletes, then you have to go back to that level. And even if you get carried, you're going to hit that wall where you have to get good to get past it at some point.
yeah. I'm gonna say something, and I know somebody listening is gonna be offended. I love you, trust me, but augmentation evokers that are just like 25, 2700,
Yep.
pretty much carried. And I will go so far as to say a lot of enhancement shamans were getting invited to keys because they were enhancement shamans with bad gear and they're not playing right, and that happens. It
They
happens.
need to be doing a lot
So
of damage, right?
yeah, and they're not right. They're under the tank sometimes, right? The augmentation evoker that just says I'm an aug and I'm meta, so bring me, and they don't know what they're doing, and you're like, this guy's not even doing the things right. Um, so that happens, and that is true, and I could see that happening. You know, those people are going to get lucky, but it's only going to last. It's a charade, right? The people will stop queuing with them because it's their key. You're going to look at how many runs they've done successfully, and if you see some guy with, let's say, in this current state right now, if I go into a thing and I see a DPS, let's just say for example, or whoever that has a 10 or 11 key and they have a 1800 rating and they're 619 or 610 item level, I'm probably not going to queue into that because and I see that they've only ever done one level 10, let's just say for example, probably not going to queue into that as a healer because something doesn't feel right. Now, not everybody uses Raider IO, right? So maybe they don't see that information, and they won't get that. So, wild take here. I'm going to transition a little bit. Wish list for me: make a really quick little rating system at the end of the dungeon, whether it finishes or not, where you can say, "Hey, Tank was great at, his attitude, his awareness, and his application of his character. He knew how to press defenses. He was throwing off heals and using utility. The enhancement shaman was rude, threatened to leave the key. He was failing to, positional awareness and standing in fire, and just wasn't. He didn't do any kicks, right? Like so, and this is something where you just, it's 3 lines. You go 4-star, 4-star, 5-star, or 1-1-1, right? Now, some of that may be, give or take, right? But make it visible to everybody in the key. There's games that do that, right? At the end of the game, you can see who scored you as like the all-star and who got like bad reviews. Some of that may be negatively implied, and people may feel depressed about that. I don't know how that goes, but that's a wild take that I think I would love to see in the game is a rating system for players' attitude, awareness, and application.
I agree with this to a certain level. The wild take for me is actually having a way to negatively vote, like the 1 star that you mentioned. Because I'm unfortunately I'm one game Andy, but I used to play some games back in the day, and I think it was one of like the Dota team games where you play with 5 other people, and then at the end of the game, you were only allowed to choose the MVP if you wanted to. Like you could vote
Mm.
for that person, and if you don't want to vote, you don't want to vote, right? But there was like no negative type of voting.
Oh,
So the idea there is if somebody performed really well and like you were impressed by them, obviously you cannot vote for yourself. You could vote for somebody else to be the MVP. And if somebody, let's say, if the tank was like doing those pulls, they never died and they interrupted everything, and you're like, oh, this guy carried the dungeon, you can definitely
yeah.
vote for them. And then I agree this rate if there is a rating like that, and it doesn't matter how many different things you can vote for, but that should be visible so people can see, okay, this guy definitely performed well in some dungeons, and I guess it has to be bugs because it doesn't make sense to vote in an organized group. But this
Sure.
guy got voted by other players in the pug with a good rating. So now I kind of can rely on him. I know that he's a good
Mhm.
player. I know that he's not gonna like quit, etc., and so forth. And I think that's gonna be good for the game. I definitely think that could have some positive impact. I don't think though that if you have negative ways to negatively vote people, that's gonna be sufficient because there's I think we can agree on this, but there's a lot of toxicity in Mythic Plus specifically.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I will give an example with the way that the one thing that kind of has like a negative voting is if you're, let's say, doing time walking dungeons, which is like heroic level, whatever. There's a way to kick somebody. You can vote to kick somebody.
Yeah.
And if everybody in the group votes yes after you initialize this voting process, they kick the people out of the group, right? Yes, all
Yeah.
4 other people need to agree, but I've seen some very toxic things happen there. So people would try to vote, let's say you're playing tank, whatever, and then you see that there's a DPS that's below the healer. people would vote this person out because he's doing bad DPS, right? So it's not like he did something. It's not like he said something bad.
Sure. Yeah.
He's just learning the class. He's not a good
Yeah.
player. But I don't
Yep.
think that should be a reason for you to be kicked from that dungeon, right? Which is
Yeah.
basically that negative vote working. But people do that because they
Yeah.
have the
True.
opportunity. The system is
The
there.
power's there.
Yeah,
Yep.
they utilize it in ways that they shouldn't be. So if there is a negative voting, I think that people would be like, you could be the best player, but maybe you said something and you triggered somebody. And it could be like, I do that sometimes. I try not to, but I see somebody like not kicking, for example. And I'm like, hey, can you please use your interrupt?
Yeah.
And some people would take it as an advice and they would start using it. But some people take it like, ooh, this guy's telling me how to play my class. Who the hell is this guy? Like, why should I listen to them? And they reply to
Plus,
me.
we have a pally tank. I don't need to kick.
I don't need to kick. Yeah. So, and then the person replies back, and then it becomes this pointless argument because nobody's ever going to win it. Like, people are not going to change from few lines that you type in chat in Mythic Plus. So, in situations like that, they would start using this negative voting as a way to revenge whatever happened, whatever arguments they have. And those arguments are not necessarily going to be relative to how you performed because somebody said something, right? You could be the top DPS, but somebody can vote you that you're bad because, So I don't think the negative system would be impactful, but if there's a way to only positively vote and basically your negative vote would be not voting, but that doesn't affect your score. Yeah, so maybe that's something that they can.
Good idea.
They can work on.
I like that. I think it's a good compromise. Yeah, for sure. I think that would work. I like that.
All right, and then just to add a little bit more on the wild takes from Mythic Plus, and that goes back to everything we said so far. But we said there's a shortage for tanks, there's shortage for healers. We introduced some ideas on how we can make them play and make more people play those roles. But my wild take here is, just make them powerful again, because why do we play the game? We want to play the game because we want to feel powerful. We want to beat the game, right? And that's very much connected to the class and the spec that you're playing. And that's why we have meta. That's why people switch the tunes that they're playing, because if whatever you're playing is not powerful, you want to be powerful. So you go and play Enhancement Shaman or whatever is popping right now on the meters, etc., right? But if the whole role that you're playing is kind of diminished, as the tanks and the healers are basically last season, then people switch to DPS, right? that's what's popping, that's what's meta. And there's no players left playing on those roles. So I think, and I don't see how that's bad. Like, if the tanks and the healers are powerful, there's going to be more people playing those roles, which is going to contribute to more keys being completed because you're not going to be stuck in LFG, etc. So make them great again and make them enjoyable so that people are not running away and playing only DPS.
Yeah. Now, when you say define powerful for you, because I'm curious what that means for you.
Oh, that's kind of like the wild take. For tanks, I guess if you revert back the changes and they become unkillable, maybe that's pushing it a little bit too far. But a lot, like, one of the reasons that the tanks are not enjoying the current season is that they're dying left and right. They require a lot of healing from the healer. So it's kind of like out of their hands at some points. So at least removing the tank busters, I guess it's going to make them more powerful. And for the healers, it's kind of like the same thing. I've talked about this before, but once you start pushing your key up to a certain level, yes, you have to heal the incoming DPS and the boss mechanics and the pool sync AoE, etc. But at some point, you kind of become irrelevant as a healer, whether or not you're being there or not, because you are now dependent on whether or not people are pressing their defensives, right? Even if at certain key level, even if you press your cooldowns as a healer, if people don't press their defensives, they're gonna die, right? It doesn't matter how much healing you're doing. And this is why I think healers do not feel powerful, because you are dependent on not only people pressing their personals, but also Yeah, also group defensives like the Mage Barrier, the Zephyr, etc. Right?
Yep. Mhm.
And that's a problem for me because what healers want to do is they want to go and heal, but Blizzard does tune and design the dungeons keeping in mind that there is Zephyr, there is Mage Barrier, there are Paladins who have defensives every 30 seconds, basically, right? They can pop something every 30 seconds. So they designed the damage patterns and the damage output thinking about people repressing those defensives.
Mhm.
And in PUGs, that's not the reality. Yeah, like they would be pressing them, but there's no coordination. So there's gonna be an AOE where people just don't have the defensives, even if they're pressing them, etc. And then you're like, okay, I'm the healer. I'm gonna go through this, and they just die, right? So I don't know how exactly they're going to make the healers more powerful. My take is just remove all of those defenses from the game, have everybody just have one, and it could be on a longer cooldown, but it's gonna be like, oh, everything went wrong. Now let me press my button to survive. Not
Yeah.
like, all right, now I need to have this spreadsheet of this boss, on the first AoE I'm
Yep.
pressing this, on the second AoE I'm pressing this, on the third AoE it's gonna be my potion, and then hopefully they press Zephyr for the fourth because I'll have nothing left, right?
Yeah.
So let the healers heal more from that perspective, be able to heal more, have less defensives, and then that's gonna make them feel more powerful and hopefully make the role better in game overall.
Okay. So I like that. But here's me for powerful. I'll give you two examples
Okay.
from a healer perspective. I don't know if you ever fought the raid boss Halfus. I don't remember what raid it was, but
Nope.
there was this mechanic where there was like a dragon in the back, and then there was this big ogre guy. He was skinnier, but he was an ogre guy. And this was a 20-man or 25-man raid, and there was like these cages with these drakes in them, and you would unlock these cages and you get a buff. And this is when Discipline Priest when you did damage, you healed. Well, one of the cages, when you open the drakes, you got a major damage increase, And back then, there was no limitation to Discipline Priest's damage in equation to healing. And so when you got this mega buff, you could single handedly heal them all. It was absolutely amazing. It was so fun. That felt amazing. Um, did you do PTR for War Within?
Yes.
Did you play Holy Paladin?
In the PDR, yeah, I did.
Oh, did you try like the big
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
damaging PTR?
When it was
Okay, how did
broken,
that
like
feel? How did
Lightsmith
that
was
feel?
broken, yeah, yeah. So that felt good, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Right? You're topping the meters on damage, you're pumping on healing. It feels
and you're a
amazing.
healer, by the way, yeah. So the thing on that is Lightsmith, the Holy Paladin spec for Lightsmith. The weapon that you throw at people, it was bug probably, it was broken, but people would do like insane amounts of damage with it. So you just press this button. You don't even have to be pressing your own buttons, although you do have a weapon on yourself as well, right?
Yeah.
And then you do like DPS amount of damage, not healer, not tank, DPS amount of damage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was
And
broken.
on the meters, you go up, up,
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
up, up. You'd be at the top. It's so
And
cool. But that was fun.
even
To me, that's fun.
yeah, and I'll go back to the Holy Paladin example in 10.1.5 when they did the first Holy Paladin rework in Dragonflight. With all the changes they did to Holy Paladin, it felt so powerful. It was the meta spec back then.
Yeah.
Everybody switched to Holy Paladin at this point, and because that's kind of what it was like, middle of the expansion of Dragonflight,
Yeah.
sort of.
Yep.
I got a lot of people. I made a Holy Paladin guide, etc. I got a lot of people messaging me and saying, "Oh, I came back to play the game just to try this." Because it was powerful.
It's
It was
powerful. Yeah,
they
yeah, for
they
sure.
nerfed it multiple times ever since, but
Yeah.
that initial tuning, which went live on the servers, was so good that everybody switched to play it. People came back to the game to try it out. It was that good, and then they started nerfing it and nerfing it and nerfing it. And in
And then
season 4, I didn't even spec Holy on my Paladin because
nope.
it was so
Yep.
bad, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was thinking, all right, so why are they kind of not learning from this? Because they did this rework, they made it very powerful. Everybody started playing it.
Yeah.
Again, when you're powerful, you enjoy it. People want to play the game
Yeah.
when you're powerful.
Yeah.
And then they started nerfing it, and people just started quitting the game. I was thinking, what if Holy Paladin is that powerful at this point, right? What if they just start bringing the other healers to that level and make them more powerful? Then people would say, oh, now Holy Priest is that powerful. Let me come back and play that, you know? And when they start with the nerfs, it's like, all right, so they're nerfing the Holy Paladin that I'm playing. So I don't want to play that anymore because it's dog water, right? What do I do? Like, do I switch to Holy Paladin, which was Holy Priest, which was still bad, you know? So they didn't buff it or anything. So I have no reason to continue playing my Holy Paladin. No reason to switch to another healer because they're still, weak compared to what Holy Paladin was. I quit the game. I'll go play something else.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think bringing players up, and that applies for DPS too. You see the same thing for DPS. You see the same thing for tanks.
That applies
to
everyone.
Part of the reason is because everybody switches to that because it's fun, and then the people that don't have the ability to go to those classes complain, rightfully so, because they're like, nobody will let me go with them to these things because I'm not XYZ spec, which is currently meta and it's broken. And so instead of bringing other classes up, which they should do, they just nerf them, and that's not fair. For tanks, here's a wild take. If you like wild tank, here's my idea for making tanks super powerful, but nobody likes the experience of healer dies on a boss fight, so then the DPS die, and then you're sitting in the dungeon for 10 more minutes while the single-handedly blood DK or Pally kills the boss by himself. That's boring, right? Yeah. Okay. In PvP, we have dampening, right? In PvP, when the gates open, dampening's already at like 50% or something, right? So your healing is less right from the gate. So what if they implemented a mechanic where once you get into combat, there was a dampening system that ramped up over a certain period of time, right? So you can't do these super long string pulls where you're like just constantly chain pulling everything because you're going to have that debuff. And maybe you don't need to have, like, maybe it only needs a second to be off before the debuff goes back to 0. But if the healer dies and the 3 DPS die, the tank can only really maybe survive for like a minute and a half, right? He could still be powerful if he's getting external heals and stuff, but he can't solo survive for 10 minutes on a boss fight, which is absolutely ridiculous. Wild take, something, just throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's very wild, but maybe the dampening is not like... I see where you're going. It's probably not the best example to implement in PvE, but yeah, something like that. Something that will basically make everybody play good, and you need all 5 people to be alive. Whatever mechanic they implement, right? Just all 5 people to be alive at some point, and yeah, I think that's gonna make it so that you can still have the tanks being powerful, but they will not be able to solo everything, right? I think that's the main problem.
What about an aura? For every person that's dead, the boss gets an aura buff.
Yeah.
You resurrect it, the buff goes away.
No, maybe in Mythic Plus, and that's definitely something that needs to be separated from Mythic Plus and Raid. But in Mythic Plus, if all 4 of your, because you're the tank, if all 4 of your teammates are alive, you get like, let's say, I don't know, 15% damage reduction for each one of them. And if one of them dies, you lose those 15%, right? If all 4 of them die, you're now taking, let's say, 100% increased damage or something like that.
Yeah,
I think that would be nice to have, and of course that should not apply to Raid.
No, for keep. Yeah, and it wouldn't have to be right away. It could maybe be a 5-second buffer, so you get to res, so the tank doesn't get killed one shot. Because,
it could be like a debuff or something. Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
That's fun.
All right, so before we move to the raid, let's talk a little bit about gearing. We've talked about Crests and Valorstones a lot. They are changing those, so you should be able to acquire them faster, etc. But I think one of the main problems with those systems is the way that you kind of enjoy them on your main. You can gear your main, you can get all the currencies that you need. But then on your ults, you're starved. And that's especially true for Valorstones. Even on your main, if you get a weapon and you have to upgrade with Valorstones, it's obnoxious because you run out very quickly. And then your ults never have those. So I think make those tradable because even right now on my main, I'm swimming in crests. Like I don't use them for anything anymore because I outgear them. I always have 2,000 Valorstones, but then I switch to a new character and I have no Crests and no Valorstones. So I think even if there's like a tax that you're playing and you want to convert them to a war-bound currency, you lose some of it, but
Yeah.
at least you're able to use them. Because right now I'm not using on my main, and I need them on everything else. And that kind of limits me. So like if I want to progress, I have to play my ults, but I still want to play my main, get my vault slots, etc. So I'm even wasting more currency on top of that. So just make them more bound tradable. I don't think that's going to require much effort, but it's going to do wonders for making everything a little bit more old friendly.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's amazing, and I wish they would do that. We've talked about this with like PvP and honor and things like that, and you can trade it. I think that makes sense. I wish they would implement it, but my wild take with gearing is this. I play PoE, and all gear is tradable pretty much forever, right? You can unequip it, send it, put it in your bank, and pick it up on an alt. You can put it on a marketplace. You can trade it to your friend. There's no there's no like I don't see the negative side effect. I mean, there's currency, there's a marketplace, and people trade currency for different gears, and people still go and farm, and people still go and do stuff, and so maybe not that loose. Maybe as a first step, your gear is just warbound. So any gear that you get your Gale of Shadows, and heroic, and then you get a mythic track in the vault. Maybe you could send that heroic piece to another one of your alts, or let's say you want to put a character, you don't want to play a certain spec anymore or certain class anymore. You're going to go to another character. You could send a couple pieces of loot to that and make it locked for 10 days, 30 days, whatever. So you're not abusing the system by, switching to different things to exploit it. Maybe make it a 30-day lockout or something like that. But allow at least there to be some, because I'm sure there's people that still don't have some of the pieces. That I know several people that their main character doesn't have pieces that they want that are BIS that their alts have. Yep. And how frustrating is that? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, and even vice versa. You just sparked an idea in my head talking about this because I kind of agree. One of the bad things that we have, I don't know how bad it is, but like I don't like the Great Vault in the sense that it's RNG, and at some point, even on my main, like there's several weeks in a row that I get crappy vault because I either have the pieces or it's not the slots that I need, etc.
Yeah.
So what if that gear that you're getting on your old, so let's say you farm for something, right? Gale of Shadows. You get it on your main, that's fine. You upgrade it, you use it, it's not warbound. But then you're still playing your main, right? You can go into that dungeon and it can drop for you again, you know? So instead of you trading it to somebody else, you could instead somehow trigger a mechanic where you can send that in the vault of an alt that you're playing, right? So this way,
they could do it.
Yeah, and you still have to play the alt to like, let's say, unlock that somehow. But they can connect it this way. So this is going to solve the problem of you have gear that you basically have to vendor or disenchant because you already have it. And then it's also going to improve somehow the Great Vault, which is pretty bad experience half of the time or even more, right? So that's going to be shooting two rabbits with one bullet.
Yep. And I think they already have the mechanic in place, because if you have a tier piece and you go on raid and it drops, you can't even roll for it. So they know you have the piece already.
Yeah.
So that mechanic is already in place. The fact that they know you have something. So that could be done. That's interesting. Yeah.
It's not going to be hard to implement as whether or not they're going to do it and how it's going to work. But yeah. All right, let's talk briefly about affixes as well. The first thing that they're changing this season is season 2. I mean, is the way that the affix at plus 12 works. So right now, at a plus 12, you get a flat increase of 10% more damage and healing that the mobs do. And then the key scale, every key level adds 10% on top of that. On season 2, they're changing this so that there's no that initial bump of 10%, but then every key level is going to scale with 12% instead of 10. Now, the problem that we have in season 1 is, and I think they kind of acknowledge that, is that we have this brick wall at the plus 12 because that jump becomes way too big. It's huge. Yeah. And it could be the case you're easily timing your 11s. You could be even like 2-chesting Dawnbreaker plus 11, and you can't even do the 12, right? And this is what my guildies do. Like they'll drag me in for keys every now and then. They would do 10s, they would do 11s, but they wouldn't even try 12s, right?
Yep.
So that makes the progression curve of Mythic Plus very edgy. Even after 12, you would do a 12, and then you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do the 13, or I don't know if I can do the 14, etc. And I remember playing back in Dragonflight. Obviously, the keys there would scale differently because we would do 20-something keys. But I remember I would like push 23s, I would push 24s, and I would time these keys, and I'm like, man, that was hard. But now I'm ready to go and try the next level. You know, I'm ready to go and try 25. I know it's not gonna be easy. Maybe I'm not gonna, but if it's a good group, we can definitely time the key.
It's achievable.
Yeah, it's achievable. Right now, it's like, oh, all right, I timed the 12, I timed the 13. I'm not going next level, man. It's not happening. It's pointless. I know I'm gonna waste my time. And it happens even so. It happens for my main. It happens for my ults as well. Like I would time on 11 on some of my ults. I'm not even considering the 12. Right? I'm out of there. I'm done. So having that progression curve being so edgy is something that it just makes people quit. Like I haven't quit the game, but I basically quit pushing at some point. And that was not the case back in Dragonflight because the progression curve was much more smoother. So I would be incentivized to, I know it's hard, but I can go and try the next keystone level. Right now, that's not the case. So I like that they're removing that bump that you have from a plus 11 to plus 12. But in my opinion, instead of increasing the amount of percentages that the key levels jump with, they should be reducing it so that they make the curve much more smoother, and you just have incentive to go one key higher, right? The only thing that this is going to change is instead of, let's say, the world first sweats, instead of them pushing plus 20s right now, or whatever they're doing, they can go up to like 22 or 23. But who cares? Like, let them push whatever. Like, I would watch this on Twitch. I don't care if it's a plus 20 or plus 23 right now. I'm not getting there. I'm not going to be playing this. I don't think they care either. It's basically the same to them. They reach a wall at some point where they just cannot push the next key without any help or whatever, like the ring, whatever. So nobody cares about that. The people that are going to be affected are the people that play in the middle of the pack and they want to progress the next key, and right now they can't. So that's definitely a change that I would like to see for next season.
Yeah, and I mean, even then, it doesn't even have to be so linear. I mean, there could be scaling, right? It could start out lower at the lower keys and just ramp up higher at the higher end, right? And that even that curve doesn't have to be a smooth curve. It can actually exponentially increase the higher you get. That way, the really small 1% or 0.5% folks can, really push as hard as they want, but it doesn't punish the people at the low and mid keys. They can still feel like it's achievable. They can get better, and so I agree with that 100%.
And it is exponential right now, but I think that they should move the curve a little bit, if that makes sense, so that the exponential, the harder the keys become, that point is moved a little bit further, so that people who play, let's say, that 10% to 1% pushers, they have a little bit of an easier time, and they can see that there is a next step that they can get to. Because right now, at some point, you're like, I'm done. There's no next step. Like, this is what happened to me this season. I managed to somehow push to 3K IO, and I'm not even gonna bother trying further, right? And in previous seasons, I would get further. Like, I would get 31, 32, 33. This season, I'm done. Like, I don't care, So yeah, that's one thing. And then kind of connected to this, but one of the affixes changes they did this season is that after you get to a plus 12, there's no weekly affixes rotating anymore. It's the same for affixes, which is the Peril, Fortified, Tyrannical, and that 10% increase, right? And I think that was very, very welcoming. Like, I think people who play past 12s, they enjoy that. There was some fear that it's not going to be good for people who are pushing high keys because it's going to be the same for them. But I don't hear that sentiment, right? They might be a little bit done a little bit earlier with their pushing throughout the season, which I guess it's fine for them as well. But I haven't heard anyone complain, oh, there's no affixes past 12. In fact, I've
No.
heard the other. Like, I had people come
Yeah.
to me and say, I actually don't play below 12 anymore because I don't want to deal
Yep.
with those stupid affixes, you know?
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. And my wild take on this topic is um, what if you allow people to pick their affixes, which is, by the way, implemented, because this is what you can do on PTR and tournament wheels sometimes. So there's scrolls that you insert in your key and they add the affixes.
Yeah.
Now, implementing a system like that, like the system itself is already in game, but incentivizing people to play different affixes, that's something that they'll have to work on for sure. Otherwise, everybody's going to do keys without affixes or with the easiest affixes, whatever that is. But I think they can have some very tricky and very smart ways to make people play with different affixes. They could be like different scores, or there could be certain affixes that if this week you insert those affixes in your key, you're going to get extra reward, you're going to get more Valorstones, you're going to get more Crests,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yep. Yep.
So I would like to see something like that being experimented. I know that's a major change, as I said, the wild take, but maybe they can experiment with that in like certain key levels, or I don't know, like even something like an off-season kind of thing, and see if there's some merit to this idea.
Yeah. There is a title. If you think you know what it is, leave a comment down below. But there's a game where there's a situation like a key, and Wolvie, I think I lost your video.
Yeah, I can still hear you, but
Did
you
it
kind
drop
of
off?
fall apart there for a second.
Yeah, I saw your camera go offline.
Yeah, I think you're back on now.
Yeah, was it me or was it you? Your
I
camera went off my stream,
Oh, I don't know who it was, but we had definitely had some connection issues there.
and you're blurry, and now you're coming in clear. There we go.
Okay, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me.
All right.
All right, so
All
start
right.
over here.
So yeah, we're back. All right. So there's a lot of merit to what you say, and here's why I say that. There's another game I play. I'm not going to say the name of the game. If you know the game, check it. Leave a comment down below. But there's something like a Mythic Plus. There's two portions of it. The first one is you earn as you go through these. We'll call them dungeons. I'll just use keys as an example. You go through a key. At the end of the key, you open the box and you get your gear, but then you also get these little things that are like those tokens you were talking about that you can use that maybe say like, oh, you're going to earn 3% more Valorstones the next key that you do if you use this coin. You're going to get 10% more Crests or 3% more Crests, whatever, right, in the next one. But also as you're going through this thing, you get to basically pick, like you said, you get to pick different, you have an option to pick different debuffs essentially that you could go through. And it's fun. It's not automatic, there every time. So maybe, it's like a little map where you say, okay, the first one you get these three options, you pick one, now you got two more open and you pick that one and then you pick the third one. It works. It's cool. It's fun. There's some RNG to it, but it's interesting twist. But having the ability to use those tokens, like you said in the beginning, that maybe are Kiss Curse or maybe they're just bonuses, is kind of a nice thing. Yeah, you get 20% more crest, but all the bosses do an additional 5% damage, something like that. It's kind of cool, and it's a challenge, right? Because like, do I really want those crests? For more damage taken? I don't know. It just depends. So it's kind of cool.
That's why it's a wild take, but yeah, that would spice up things a little bit. And if
For
they
sure.
do a good job implementing it, people will love it, So
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, a little bit of experimentation in that direction. I think it's gonna be much welcome.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the rate quickly because there's definitely things to be wished there as well. Now, my biggest take on the raid after we've procced Brute Twister, we killed Kaiveza. Right now we're on Silken Court. Hate that fight, by the way, as well. But my biggest ask for the raid is do more simplistic mechanics. The nightmare that we had with setting up a Blood Twister weak auras was obnoxious. Like, I did not, that was probably the experience that I enjoyed the least of all the raiding that I've ever done in WoW. And then Kaivezo, on the other hand, was the completely opposite. It had few mechanics, but they were very well designed. You didn't need any weak auras for them. And I had a blast. Like, I felt sorry when we killed this boss because I knew what's coming after that, right? I would like to keep progging Kaivezo. So I would like to see much more simplistic design. I know that this could affect high-end mythic rating guilds and things like that. But they're like buffing everything for the race to world first anyway, right? So they can make it as hard as they want for that. But then once we get to those bosses, I would not like to see any kind of stupid weak auras and things like that, because we talked about this, but even the Brute Twister fight, they could have implemented the mechanics in such a way that you wouldn't need a weak auras. If there was like a coloring of the eggs that you have to pop and the rings that you get, and you know where you need to go, things like that. So that's probably my biggest thing, because I enjoy raiding, I enjoy killing bosses, I enjoy progging bosses, but I don't enjoy mechanics where you basically cannot solve them and you need outside help to do that. So that's my biggest ask here. And I know it's not easy to design things like that, but that's their job, and they've done it with Kaivezo, so they can definitely do it again.
They can definitely do it. So I'm going to say this. I can't add anything more to that because you nailed it. And so on top of that, I'm going to steal your idea, which I thought was a brilliant idea, which was, you know what? There's some guilds that love that complexity, and make a separate realm for the race for world first people.
Yeah.
Let them play all the crazy weak auras and get analysts and do all that, and let them race over there, and let the regular raiders do the stuff without all that craziness. Like Princess, it's a fun fight. Like you said, there's basically two mechanics. That's enjoyable. You don't need a ton of weak auras, maybe some coordination with cooldowns for healers, but that's to be expected. That's every fight.
Yeah.
But having to sit there and make sure every single thing is set up, which you already went over, which I said I wasn't going to talk about. You're right. That's unrealistic for the majority of people. So if you want to appeal to that 0.5% of the population that are doing Race for World First, make a Race for World First tournament, or Race for World First realm. Make it maybe it's only invitation only, right? You can even limit maybe there's qualifiers, right? So it is what it is there. You can make all the bosses the same, but add elements for those folks there, and then leave the regular stuff to us.
Yeah.
But a lot of the raid is designed for that group and the challenges, and that's why we have Shifting Sands buff, because people still at 636 with 16% healing and damage increase, still having a hard time on Kaivezo, and that maybe that's where they need to be, and that's fine. But those 1%, they really do it at like 619 item level and killing before nerfs. Those are just amazing players, and they do need something a little bit more challenging.
Or make a Race to World First difficulty level. Like, if you guys want to check, we had an episode where we talked about rates, and the wild take is there. So you can check out all the episodes if you want to. But changes on that, and I think are going to be welcome for the majority of the players. And then, of course, we still want to watch the Race to World First, but there's ways to keep that and then still play the game regularly for the rest of us. Another wild take, I don't know if it's a wild take, but another take on the raid is there's...
You again.
Is it me or you?
Me?
It shows me. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. It shows you, but it doesn't. Now I see you. You just popped up again.
Let me see.
My internet? My internet's good, I think.
I'll run a ping and see what happens next time. All right. So the next thing about the raid, since we're back on now, the next thing about the raid, I would like to see two things happen. First, no trash. And second, once you die, just spawn right there where the boss is. And my reason for that is you're basically wasting people's time with trash and with running back. And if you're doing mythic progression, mythic bosses, they're already hard enough. Some of those bosses took us 100, 200, 300 attempts, right? And if you are adding just an extra time for people to run back, or because we do them over the span of multiple nights and you have to re-clear the trash every time you go back in, you're basically wasting a lot of time of 20 people's time, right? If you add all of this time up together. So make it easy. Like, a lot of guilds fall apart on the hard mythic bosses, and I'm not saying this is going to fix the game in general, but it's going to make it at least a little bit easier for people that are progging those bosses and are struggling, because now they spawn right there and they can just pull the boss right away. And I think one of the reasons that they're doing the things that they're doing them right now, because it works for some bosses, but for some doesn't, they want to have this feeling that the raid is big and, you can experience the whole environment and you can see how you're progressing to the raid and getting to the next boss. But you can leave that there for like the normal and the LFRs part, so people can see and experience the raid. But once you get to mythic raiding and even heroic raiding, you're now progging the bosses. You don't care about the raid. You don't care if there's trash. You don't care where you are. You only care about the single boss that's right in front of you, doing the mechanics and killing that boss. And if you make me run 1 minute every time we wipe on a 150 wipe boss, I'm not going to enjoy that. Like, I don't care if this is the most beautiful raid that you've ever seen and the trash is amazing and it has perfect mechanics, I don't care about that, man. If you're repeating something more than, 2 times even, I'll go as low as 2, and you make me do something that's obnoxious every time, I'm gonna hate it, right? So keep those big experiences and feelings that you wanna have in the raid for the people in LFR and maybe normal. But once you go into progging, once you wipe a few times on a boss, just remove that and let people play the game instead of running back and wasting their nerves, basically.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say to that. I don't know if it was you or maybe it was a video I was watching, but one of the things about trash was somebody saying that, like you said, they want it to feel big, but they want it to feel like some of that's embedded in the WoW culture, and they want to feel like the place is alive. So there's some validity to that. I'll troll here a bit and say, what about our mythic BOEs though? We need our mythic BOEs, right? So you're always gonna have that group. Here's my wild take. We already have white protection, right? We do it. Every raid does it. You have to put a soul stone on a healer, put a soul stone on a healer. Yep. Okay, so here we go. Transcriptionists, hear me out. Let's make a little consumable called white protection, right? And one person in the raid can consume this thing for the raid, and they don't have to have a soul stone. It's a healer, and they're always there, and they could just resurrect the whole thing. We already got mass resurrection. It takes a couple seconds and just resurrect everybody. You don't have to worry about white protection, because it's so much time running back. And if they forget to do it, then a shaman has to onk, and then they have to res everybody. People are already doing that. Why make it painful? Just either let everybody respawn at the door, or just allow something like a white protection for the team that doesn't have to be manually done by some other classes mechanic that they already do.
And those things happen, but sometimes for whatever reason, because you get the soul stone, you might not have a warlock. I'll just say that you might not have a warlock in your raid. And also there are battle reses, but sometimes you use the battle reses because you still think you can progress the boss encounter, and then you wipe and there's no battle res, right? So I know that there's things to mitigate this, but why does it have to be in players' hands, and why does it have to be dependent on what happens in the fight? You can just press the release button and you could be right there, right? It's not that hard to do. So,
they could just put a little thing in the front of the dungeon that you click on it and it makes you go faster 20%. That's such a silly thing.
They have this in this raid, I think. You have like the flying pads and you have the movement speed, but that still takes time, right?
It's too much time.
It's like running back. It's annoying.
Yeah, it is. It's so annoying.
All right, so one more thing on the raids. One thing that I've been enjoying compared to some of the earlier raids that I've done is that right now we have like 8 bosses, maximum 9, I think, in the last few raids. And there were raids with like 12 bosses before that. So I enjoy the less because we just raid a certain amount of time in the week. We have 2 nights, 3 hours each night. And I think that's kind of like the standard. A lot of guilds are devoting up to 3 nights per week. Obviously, we're not playing like the Race to World first, progging 24/7 until we kill everything, right? So having less bosses and will allow you to basically progress faster and progress further, because it's one thing to have to kill 10 mythic bosses, and then it's another thing to have to kill, let's say, 6 or 7 or 8, right? One boss could be 300 pool of difference, which could be 300 pulls, depending on the boss, could be even a month if you're riding two nights a week, right? So having less, I think, is better. I wouldn't even mind seeing less bosses overall from the 8. That's maybe personal to me, but I wouldn't mind a 6 boss raid or something like that. And I wouldn't even mind if they're like, I know they've done this before. I wasn't around when they released smaller raids with just 1 or 2 bosses. But I wouldn't mind seeing that as well, because even now they did a raid for the anniversary event with the Blackrock Depths or whatever the name was, right?
Yeah.
I did this a couple of times. It was enjoyable. It was different bosses, different mechanics. You had to learn, progress it a little bit. But there was no incentive to go and play it. I bugged it because my guild didn't want to go and do it. They didn't have a reason to, right? But if that was a raid where, and maybe it had too many bosses if it's like a second raid in the tier, right? But maybe if the bigger raid was just less bosses and then you release 1 or 2 bosses like that in the middle and then people can prog this as well. Obviously, that's going to affect Race to World First in ways that maybe they're not desiring, but I think it's going to make it much better for the rest of us, to have those steps and to be able to progress further because there's less bosses, things like that. Maybe that's personal again. I don't know, but I would love to have something like that because right now we'll be progging the mythic bosses no matter how far we get into the raid until their end of the tier, right? And if we could be one of the CE guilds that killed it halfway through and then either farm it or have a rest until the rest of the tier, I think if you allow more people to have this experience, that's going to be better and maybe less guilds are going to fall apart.
Yeah. I'm kind of twisted on this one. I don't have a hard take. I think I was around during Wrath when we had was it Ruby Sanctum? It was one, and I think, or was that might have been later. But there was there was the single dragon with the bag, and that those were fun raids. There was a lot of trash in that raid, but it's still, you could get it done pretty quickly. I always think you have to look at I think you have a valid point. So let's say there was like 6 bosses. That would be like the Race to World First. And then maybe introduce a dungeon or a raid with like 2 bosses. I think they did that too. There's been a few expansions where they did that. And then maybe a 1, right? So there's a little bit of a break in between. It keeps play because let's be honest, a lot of this has to do with longevity for them and making money, and it is a money machine. And so they do want players to be progressing for a longer period of time. If they spaced out some of this, where it was like 6, maybe it's still 8 bosses, but maybe it's like 6 bosses and then 2 1 and 1 or 6 2 1, something like that, and spread out. That'd be kind of cool. I think that'd be fun, and it would re-engage players and encourage them to come back for some of these things because it's a new boss and it's new gear.
And you said money machine, but if you do it this way, maybe some people will just come back. The people who quit, they'll just come back for those 2 extra bosses so they can see them, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
And then they can even have like a smaller Race to World First events for who's gonna kill them.
Well, they're gonna race for sure. Absolutely.
It depends on how they implement it, but I mean that could be a thing. So it would keep people engaged in different ways for longer periods in time. At least in my mind, I might be wrong, but it is something to think about. All right, let's move quickly outside of the raid and the Mythic Plus. I don't have any wild takes for PvP because I don't PvP, but one of the things that got brought up a lot this season was the Delves and the Follower Dungeons, which was a big introduction to the game. And one of the things that we found out the hard way, I guess, through the comments, that there are a lot of people who actually experience the game only through that type of content. They're not doing raids, they're not doing Mythic Plus. But even if those people, they had some takes and saying, well, I would love to see, for example, the Follower Dungeons to have levels like Mythic Plus, because right now they're too easy, right? I like doing them, but I would like to progress them without being exposed to the toxicity in Mythic Plus and the fact that I have to play with other people. I would even like to see affixes introduced to the Follower Dungeon so I can learn how they work, and if I decide to go into Mythic Plus, now I am prepared. And I even went further there and saying, if you do this for the Follower Dungeons, basically they're going to be like Mythic Plus dungeons, but with AIs, with NPCs. You can even test the affixes this way because we had some pretty bad affixes they had to fix. The orbs not being able to be soaked
Yep.
in many of the bosses. If you implement that in follower dungeon and the NPCs cannot handle the affix, you know that's a bad affix. And
Yep.
it will be a free testing, right? You can just let 5 NPCs go into the dungeon. You can run as many tests as those as you want. And you're gonna find a lot of things that we then start crying when the season goes live. Oh, this is too hard, and this is
Yeah.
not working,
Yeah.
and this is not
Yeah.
fair. You're gonna
Yeah.
know. You're gonna know. So you're gonna release the game in a better state. You're probably gonna fix a lot of bugs because you're gonna find those bugs through the NPCs if you monitor them somehow, and they'll have the opportunity to do that. And then once that goes live, people will have different ways to play the game, experience the game. They could be separate progression parts, separate gear, things like that. And even if you want to, then you can use that to learn how to play Mythic Plus or even Raid, and then eventually go into those game modes.
Yeah, I like the levels for sure. I think testing affixes makes a lot of sense, and I think it brings a fun element. And like you said, to allow people to train. We had some apps come in this week, and actually quite a few of them were players that only do solo content and are starting to kind of branch out and wanted to get involved in guilds. So there's definitely a big player base that just do solo content. And so two things with that. Number one, yeah, there's a player base. Number two, that content gets chunked through, and now they're looking for more social, right? Because there's a cap to it. It's a very low cap, I think. And with not a lot of incentives on the high side of that cap, right? There's not really much to get for them pushing the 11s over and over. So I think, making it unlimited like Mythic Plus would be cool. So push it as high as you can, right? The way now you have leaderboards. They should, originally they were saying like, you don't even need the raid and you don't need to do dungeons. You can be the same item level just with delves. We'll make that come true. Allow them to actually compete. Maybe make it challenging, but let them do some of that solo content to a point where they can be competitive, and it may make that transition to Mythic Plus or to raids a little easier. Now, I will say, I did a key the other week, and there was a guy that had like 636. It was 100% crafted gear, and I invited him. I didn't really look at the Raider IO. He was 636. I
What could go wrong?
Yeah, and it was all crafted gear. It was a tank, and of course, he's 36 tank. You're just gonna snatch him up, and the poor guy had no clue what he was doing, and so you will run into that. Right?
Yeah.
It happens. But I think that community should still get the opportunity to challenge themselves to super high levels, and I think that even players that don't do solo content will try to achieve some of those leaderboards because it's fun. People like leaderboards, and if there's a challenge and there's cosmetic rewards or even other rewards, I think people would do it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's a place to explore. I guess we can go now to the hold on. You're not shown on the camera. We can still hear your voice.
Okay, good.
But
Must be me.
yeah, I'm not sure what's wrong then. Hold on, let me try to do this. Yeah, so you'll be invisible. We can still hear you though. I guess that's the important part. Let's do a few more wild takes, which are outside of the raid and the Mythic Plus. I do have something about professions because when they announced the professions in Dragonflight, the profession changes with the points and everything, I was kind of excited. I have this friend who is playing different games because he just likes grinding professions and trading, auction housing, things like that. And he was asking, "Oh, should I come back to the game and play WoW? Because now you can be like this guy who just plays the game from the perspective of doing professions and selling and crafting and things like that." And I was like, "Yeah, that's gonna do it." But it turns out that's not the case because professions were not what at least I was expecting them to be. And it's a system that seems to be good on paper, but I'm barely interacting with it as I am, although I do want to. And I have a few takes here which could definitely make it better. So the first thing is right now I have many oaths which have different professions, and I can craft different items from them. Like I can craft mail, I can craft blade, I can craft leather, but I cannot do it in my own warband if they're on different servers, and some of my tunes are on different servers.
Mm.
So that's very annoying. And then the other thing that happens is, okay, I have this rare pattern on, let's say, my monk or something, but I'm logged into a different character. And I see somebody spamming in trade chat, ooh, I want this crafted, can somebody help? And I'm like, ooh, it's me. But, it's not a different character. So they're not, if I could message them from that character, then it would be a different experience, right? So I don't even bother with this. But what if you could have this access to every profession that your warband has from one character, right? So let's say I'm enchanting an alchemy on my main, but then somebody requests something for a jewel crafter, and my oath is a jewel crafter, right? What if I could fulfill that work order from my main character because my oath knows it, right? So I think that would make the system a bit more interactive, a bit more usable, so to speak. And that would not only allow me to be able to work with the trade services chat, because right now I don't bother. It's very unlikely that somebody's gonna message me to craft something on the tune that I'm logged in right now and can perform that specific recipe,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
And then I cannot craft within my warband, which is very annoying, right? I have this small empire of oaths, but I cannot use them because they're on different servers. So I think that's going to solve both of those, and it's going to make it much more pleasant to be able to play with your warband and engage with the professions.
Okay.
It might
Can
be
I
a wild
respond to
take. But
that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I don't think the rationale around, like, I'm on my character and I have another character that is jewel crafting. I do herbalism and alchemy, but my jewel crafter, I should be able to satisfy it because you're not on your character. But here's a wild take. Why can you have, like, crafting guild followers that every character that you level up can have one or two crafting followers that can craft for you? So it's not you yourself doing the crafting. Yeah, you can go out into the world and get your herbs, or or whatever, or you could send them out on missions to get their herbs and stuff, or do it, whatever. But now, as part of your warband, you can have these followers satisfy any of those orders. Now you're not kind of breaking the code of, like, oh, my shaman's offline, but I'm crafting jewel crafting for it. You have your follower do it or something like that. I mean, I think your point is valid, where it's like, look, I've earned these things. I should be able to get rewarded for them, and I shouldn't have to live on that character to get rewarded for them. But I could see them saying, no, you got to be on the character that actually did the craft, because that's how it works. I think the point is, ultimately, yeah, there's some people that play other games that, like, rant and rave about the crafting system in those games and kind of poo-poo on WoW's crafting, and I think there's probably some validity there. I don't play any of those games, so I don't have that experience. But I hear that, there's a lot more satisfaction and reward feeling in some of these other games, and so I think, Blizzard should kind of wake up and look at that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't probably enjoy that type of gameplay if that's all I'm doing, but I would love to do something like that on the side in World of Warcraft, and right now I just can't, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned gathering, just one more wild take. The gathering profession is a little bit different compared to the crafting ones, right? And one thing that I kind of have fun with is if I'm on an oath, which obviously is not my main, that has gathering professions, and I'm queuing up for dungeons, because the LFG2 takes a while, especially if you're DPS, I can fly around and gather herbs or mine things, which, it's not what I want to do, but it's something that makes the LFG experience a little bit more pleasant for me. So what if you just allow everybody to have one gathering profession, as everybody's allowed to have cooking or fishing or something like that?
Yeah.
So that you have something to do while you're out in the world for whatever reason. If it's waiting for LFG or just questing or something, you have some extra thing that you can get engaged to and then get some benefit out of it.
It makes sense, right? I mean,
Yeah.
anybody can walk down the street and pull some flowers out of the
Exactly,
earth.
right?
You don't necessarily need to be a herbalist to say, "Hey, there's a flower. Let me go grab it."
Yeah.
I think there's some validity there, and that's why I think first aid and fishing were, like, gimmies, right? Because I mean, anybody should be able to do it. I think that's fair to say with gathering. I think pretty
Yeah.
much, and maybe you can only do one, right? You can
Yeah.
pick
Yeah.
one, and then you can have two professions. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I like that.
That should be good. All right. One wild take that I guess it's relevant only to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's because I'm playing Shaman. Uh, I play all three specs, and I guess Shaman is unique in that perspective because you have a healer spec, you have a DPS range spec which uses intellect, and then you have a melee DPS spec which uses agility. But this is my main, right? So I have all the crests, all the gear, etc. But I'm struggling playing the different specs. And the reason for that is that you need different enchants, different weapons, different trinkets, and different stats for each of the specs. Shaman is obnoxious in that sense because I main healer, which uses critical strike and versatility as main stats, and then I go play enhancement, which uses exactly the opposite. It's haste and mastery. So I need to have different pieces of gear. I need to have different enchants. Like I DPS as enhancement shaman with intellect enchant on my legs because it's too expensive to change, right? Same as I DPS as elemental shaman having healing enchant on my weapon because I don't want to spend 5k gold to change it for one dungeon, right? And then I have to farm different weapons, I have to farm different trinkets. And yes, I understand that's part of the game, but mythic track pieces are premium, right? You cannot just go and farm them. So I'm limited to that, getting them from my vault, maybe as an off-spec in raid, but that's a long shot. So having to do all of those things differently on my main is obnoxious. So I would like to see at least some work towards that on like the enchants so that I can play with the same enchants on different specs. And then even like somehow being able to switch stats or something because it feels really bad to be DPSing with the wrong enchants and the wrong stats. Again, might be just because I'm playing Shaman, but I think some work could be done. Yeah, it could be done towards that direction.
Druids don't come after him. He does play druid too, but druids are in that boat. I think paladins are in that boat, right? I mean, you think about paladin. If you're tanking, you need a one-hander and a shield. If you're a ret, you need a two-hander. If you're, if you're holy, you need a shield and a thing. So there's a few classes that are like that, and there's a lot of that nuance with the secondary stats. And so I think wild take here, Star Wars: The Old Republic. There's these like mods that you could put on your gear, and you can take them on and off. And those mods will allow you to get certain stats that you could just change. And so I mean, but in our game, you can't take sockets out and put them back in. You could just destroy them, and that's expensive. But if you had multiple things that you can take on or put off, like on a piece of gear, I think that would satisfy a lot of that because it is expensive. And I could see the jewel crafters and the enchanters getting a little upset about like, no, like keep it the way it is because I want people to buy my enchants. But when you're playing that as a main, I mean, it's uncomfortable, and you don't want to spend that money on that stuff because some people do play a lot of specs, and it gets cost prohibitive, and that's why I have 3 priests, and that's why I have 2 druids, and because it's I'd rather spend the time leveling them because it's so quick, and now I could farm that gear on those and not have to worry about enchants and stuff. So I mean, I'm probably a little different when it comes to that, but yeah, I think that's I agree with you. It shouldn't be so cost prohibitive.
Even for olds, even if you gear them, you still have premium mythic track pieces. Like you're never gonna get to that level where you can push the highest keys because you're just behind, right?
Yep.
All right, one small other take, which I think kind of improved a lot in the War Within, but I do some achievements and some world quests and world events, and I was hating Dragonflight because every event would be on a timer. So if you wanted to do the time waste or saving the camp, the Suffering camp, etc., right? You have to be there at a specific time, like the theater event right now in the War Within. It's on every hour exactly, and you have to be there, and you have to spend 15 minutes. And I want to do those things. For example, the theater event drops some patterns from some professions that I want to be having, so I want to do it multiple times and farm that. But I can't because it's very limiting to be there at a certain point. Let's say you're doing Mythic Plus. What happens? Oh, guys, can you wait for me 15 minutes? I need to AFK here and wait for this event to finish. Like you're in the middle of the key. Guys, theater in 5 minutes. Let's get out. We're not finishing the dungeon, right? So this is very obnoxious, and I know that there are people who are playing those type of events as their main type of just engaging with the game. And they're saying, yeah, you just go do your Mythic Plus and leave us alone, but I want to be playing this too. Why are you excluding me? But I can't. And I think it's just the theater this time around. The other events you can just go do, and they're much better because you just do a couple of quests in the area, you unlock the main event, or like that machine thing in the Ringing Deeps, that little event where you can just start it whenever you want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing it alone, but I enjoy that much more because I have control of it. If I want to go do it, I just go and do it.
Exactly.
I don't have to be there at a certain point because I only have 15 minutes left before I go to bed, but theater is in 35. It's not fair. So yeah, I think they improved a lot, but I would like to see those timers being gone altogether forever, so that people can engage with the content on their own terms.
I haven't done a delve since I think third week. I haven't done world content since probably the second week. I don't do any of that stuff, man. I can't even be bothered. I don't chase achievements. I am like, I have no comment on these things. I don't even touch
That's
them,
why
man.
I said it's my own take, but there might
I'm sure there's other people that are like you though. I think that's going to resonate with some of the audience. It's just me personally. Like I can go on and on about PvP and but there's going to be a lot of people that are like, what? I don't even do PvP, So
Exactly.
there's different things for everybody. This is just not one of the ones I'm into. I can get where you're coming from, but I don't have a comment because I don't do it.
Okay. Well, then last take, and I think I'll let you take the reins on this one. But what if we have a mentorship program in World of Warcraft? And I'll let you talk about this because it's basically your take.
Yeah, so in Star Wars: The Old Republic, they have this system where you can basically flag yourself as a mentor, and people can queue into that system, and you're not carrying them, but you're showing them around, you're answering questions, you're kind of leading them and helping them understand the game a little bit more, and you get incentivized, you get currency and stuff from it, and I think that's super cool. I think there's a lot of people in the game that don't understand PvP. And it's a deep game. And then the same thing, those same players. I mean, there's players that are, Super Tease, who's one of my favorite streamers. He's a very well-known PvP guy. He's been doing it forever.
Yep.
He won't even do keys because and this guy is super intelligent, man. And he will not get into keys because he doesn't know where to start. And, there's a little bit of reluctance because he doesn't want to mess it up for other people. Right. So, but having a mentorship program where people can understand, how do I queue LFG? How do I get into a mythic raid? How do I get into a heroic raid? How do I get into a normal raid, right? Instead of these instant queue things, how do I get to that next level without feeling uncomfortable and shy and worried about, how do I unlock these things? I think it's a big deal. And I think, you're helping two sides, right? You're rewarding the mentor, and then the mentee can feel comfortable. And I think you had a really good take on this, going back to the rating system. So why don't you touch on that?
Oh yeah, so we talked about how we can rate people after the key is done, and you can just vote them to be the MVP or something like that. So that's gonna be somehow connected to a score that you can see. And then let's say you have a good score. That could allow you to actually be a mentor. So maybe there's like a checkbox whether or not you want to do it, because not everybody obviously is going to be wanting to do something like this. But you can check this box, and then you could have a rating, and that could be a leaderboard of itself. Who's like the best mentor, who has the best score. And then once you queue into whatever that session is going to be, where you're going to get mentored, you can see the different people, you can pick from them, and they will be incentivized to have a good score because, as you said, that could be connected to some benefits that they will be getting, right? They're teaching you to play the game, but then they can get Augie runes or gold or whatever, right? So you would be incentivized to be like that person who has a good score. I don't know if it's a good thing to make this competitive, but it could definitely tie back to some of the other systems and some of the other suggestions that we already had to make the game better overall.
You know what? I'm okay with competition for betterment because the game can be very toxic at
Yeah.
times, especially in certain elements of the game. PvP not excluded, Mythic Plus not excluded. I think Raid there's a little bit more control. But some of the automatic queuing systems earlier you talked about the 4 vote kick out of a heroic dungeon, it can get pretty toxic. So putting elements to combat that and making it competitive, I think it's a good thing because you will start to see people, especially if there's significant rewards locked behind positive attitudes. I think that could start to encourage a positive environment and people kind of paying a little bit more attention to not being rude and not being abrasive and maybe being more polite and helpful.
It will, for sure. My only concern with making it competitive, specifically the mentorship program, is that it could create some very hard barriers to entry because the best people are basically going to get the rich get richer. They're gonna mentor all the people, and then let's say you are like, "Ooh, I'm 2 weeks late, but like I'm this good player. I can mentor people. I want to get into this. Oh, I have no score, so nobody's gonna pick me because I'm somewhere down in that ladder, and everybody's already taking the cherries on top of the cake." So yeah, it all depends on how they implement it, of course. But as long as there's no barriers to entry, I'm all up for that because that is, I think that's definitely something that I'll be participating and engaging with for sure.
Cool.
All right, so that's gonna be all for this episode, guys. But do let us know what are your takes, what are your wish list items in the comments below. We did take a look at the game in general. We didn't have any specifics for like classes and specs, but we're gonna have much more episodes coming with that next, with all the changes on the PTR and everything that's gonna be coming up for season 2. So stay tuned for that. Check the links below to subscribe to the podcast channel and keep an eye for extra videos and extra content. It was a pleasure. We'll see you in the next episode. Now it's bye-bye and take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.